Welcome to Alpha Centurion. I'm your host, Alpha. This is a new series called Questioning Trent. I'm going to be going through the Council of Trent. In this video, we are going to be looking at the background and context for the current available translation of the canons and decrees of the Council of Trent, and the history that built up to this council being held and its first session right here. So this is what we're going to be going through. The only complete in-print version of Trent in English I could find for sale is a 1978 reprint published by Tan Books of a 1941 edition translated into English from the Latin by Reverend H.J. Schroeder. And the other English translations are said to be incomplete summaries or poor translations that use outdated language. First up is the anonymous 1967 translation of Trent into English that is said to be a burlesque travesty. Ain't that a review? Next is a 1848 translation out of London by Reverend J. Waterworth that is said to be dated. Then there is a 1951 translation by T.A. Buckley that is said to be antique in its language and of unknown quality in its translation. And lastly, an 1869 translation out of Philadelphia by Reverend A. Nampon that is sadly incomplete. There are some CreateSpace open source translations out there, but the translation I used was the only popular version I could find with a reputable publisher behind it. As for the history that led up to Trent itself, the story is an interesting, if not convoluted one. It begins. In 1053, the Great Schism occurs between the Western and Eastern Church, mostly through petty anathemas over political grudges, most of which were not taken seriously by the lay congregates, which would attend Latin or Greek masses as they were available without compulsion. The final break, or the real break, occurred in 1204 during the Fourth Crusade, when Catholic Crusaders sacked Orthodox Constantinople, their allies, separating the Latin and Greek, Rite and See, in some ways to this day. And a peace was not brokered until 1965, when the anathemas and excommunications were lifted and rescinded. The theological differences were over the filioque, the political, secular ascendancy of the Latin Rite Pope, and leaven versus unleavened bread being used during the Eucharistic meal. Next, we get to 1096, and that is when the Crusades began. These are four prolonged and protracted battles between Christendom and Islam over lands conquered by Muslim invaders between 629 and 1050, some of which was ruled by its Muslim overlords in peace for hundreds of years. The next big issue to arise in Christendom was the formalization of the long-standing practice of indulgences in 1095. One issue of the ordinances was that any ecumenical council that gave it authority would be solely of the Western Latin half of the church, or from the Western Latin half of the church through its bishops, and not of the whole single church being blessed by its overseeing patriarchs. This showed a shift in power in the religious world, as the Pope now had demonstrable power over theological and doctrinal developments as its sole head. Something the Eastern Greek Church and its supporting churches would take exception to, take as a slight, and see as a sign of disrespect. In 1291, the Crusades officially end, with Latin Rome, the Holy Roman Empire, and England stronger in prominence for it. Side note, some say that the last real battle of the Crusades happened with the Sixth Anti-Christian Crusade by the Muslims in 1571, which ended in failure for the Muslim side. Then we skip ahead to when Johann Mentlin publishes a Bible in German using movable type. This is the first Bible in the West not to be in Latin, Greek, Aramaic, Coptic, or Hebrew. In other words, not in an original biblical language to be published. Think of the Quran being read in English at a mosque today for a Muslim. This was a big deal for the Christian world and very controversial, not just among the upper hierarchy, but even among the lay people. This was a big deal, and not everyone was happy about it. And by that, I mean including the lay people. Some lay people found it disrespectful as a really weird change. In 1492, the Reconquista ends, and Hispania is now firmly Catholic. And at the same time, or at around the same time, Columbus reaches America at Hispaniola in the Caribbean. In 1517, Luther, annoyed with Johann Tetzel, puts out his 95 Theses against Indulgences. In 1520, Pope Leo X issues a papal bull against Luther, and specifically against his 95 Theses. In 1521, the Diet of Worms is held, and the Holy Roman Empire puts Luther on trial, and, according to most reports that I read, Luther is exiled. Then, sometime between 1526 and 1530, Lutheranism becomes a thing, and Protestantism becomes a viable movement. Then in 1534, Martin Luther put out his German translation of the Bible, in which he took out certain words, such as the word not, from phrases such as not by faith alone, as well as taking some other non-kosher liberties with the text that would later be overturned by his own contemporaries. And he de-emphasized the deuterocanonical books, or the Deuterocanon, calling it apocryphal. In 1537, the Tyndale Bible is first published in English, and a violent Catholic rebellion is put down in England. Meanwhile, throughout all of this, Christendom was at war with the Ottoman Turks. In 1538, England, within its own sovereign territories, dissolved Catholic holdings and took back lands it had granted to the Catholic Church. In 1540, Mexico and New Mexico are conquered by Spain and become Catholic. Around the same time, the Pope rules against the slavery of the indigenous people, and then later on, he'll rule against slavery of all people. And the lay people, especially in the Protestant side, will not like this ruling. So even though later on a lot of the abolitionist movements will come out of Quakerism in America, at least in the beginning, a lot of the Protestants had a real problem with the elevation of the quote-unquote noble savage and of people darker than themselves. In 1541, John Calvin returns to Geneva from exile. In 1542, the Holy Office, better known as the Inquisition, is established by Pope Paul III. And just for those that don't know, the Inquisition is still going on today. Some people think it ended, just like indulgences. Indulgences are still around. In 1543, Lutheranism founds its first church in its own name. And then in 1544, Catholic Scotland is at war with England. England will eventually become Protestant and then become Anglican. In 1545, the Council of Trent begins, and then in 1563, the Council of Trent concludes. I should also note that one of Martin Luther's more controversial works is written at this time, which was Against the Lies Told by the Jews. Luther's not a great guy. I don't know why you guys hold this guy up as a hero. That being said, and I shouldn't pass judgment on him, and I'm not passing judgment on him. Let's take a quick look at Martin Luther himself. Luther was a German Augustinian monk who had an abusive, angry father and suffered from what is called scrupulosity, or what we might today call OCD, when it comes to sins and guilt. And now let's move forward just a little bit. The Council of Trent was not a disciplinary work, unlike many assume. Nor was it one simple meeting. It took years to come together and then more years to commence. Its purpose was to define doctrines and to reply to the heresies of Protestantism, as well as to reform the church from any corruption that may have crept in over the years. Another major task of the council was to address the two ways or twofold justification theology that had arose within the church, a compromised doctrine that would be ironed out, corrected, and removed from Catholic dogma by Trent. A fact many Protestants seem to misunderstand to this day. The stated goal was simple: reconciliation, unity, and peace. Not just between the pious Catholic and the new Protestant, but between the church as a whole, East and West, to heal schisms both minor and great. On this final note, Trent, it seems, failed. But that may not be the end of the story. The bull that called for the Council of Trent to be held was issued by Pope Paul III on the 22nd of May in 1542. It gave the surrounding context, the reasons for the untimely delay given the grave matter at hand, and the reasons why the locations for its convening had to be switched so many times, mainly because of the wars, both petty and great, going on throughout Europe and the Mediterranean. Also, major events had been taking place. China, Japan, and the New World of the Americas had become accessible to the West, and things such as technology were changing rapidly. Thanks to the printing press and the discoveries of Copernicus, as well as the revolution in art taking place under Michelangelo, the world was changing rapidly. The first session is something of a disappointment. On December 1546, they agreed to three things. That a celebration was to be called for, that the Trinity was undivided, Father, Son, Holy Spirit, and that they should wait until after the festival holiday, or holidays, to start the general and ecumenical council. And that's it. That is what I've read so far. So that's the intro, the paper bull, and the first session. That's everything. Just looked up the general history. Just wanted to make sure I had the background correct. Please comment down below if you have found another copy that's not from CreateSpace of the Council of Trent. As you know, this is partially a response to Mike Winger and his accusations against Trent, but many Protestants have the same accusations. I've never read Trent before, so I'm reading this as I go, and I'm reacting as I go. So I'll be putting in questions, things that I find interesting. I'm not going to go line by line in these videos. I'm just going to kind of go through the book and things that either bring up questions, any questions that I might have that come up while I'm reading, or anything that really hits me as being powerful or interesting. I'm going to talk about in these videos. So don't expect these every week. I'm shooting for maybe once a month. There are 12 sessions, so it's going to take about a year. Are there 12 sessions? Let me see. How many sessions are there? There are 25 sessions. So this whole series could take about a year. I'm not planning to do a video every week, but when I finish one session and I have time, I will put together a script and then do a video. I will be doing another series as well at the same time, so expect about 2 videos a month from me from now on. And I would love to continue the weekly series that I was doing, but there weren't really a lot of viewers on that one. So anyway, I have 2 secret channels. If you can find them, you can either watch me working out and doing martial arts, or you can find me reviewing comic books and movies. Good luck finding those channels. Anyway, peace, like, and subscribe. Talk to you all later.